I guarantee you know somebody who smokes cigarettes and how they have cravings and whatnot. That's basically the same thing with opioid usage.
Tonight, in a special Health Check 10 investigation, an exclusive and rare look behind bars at a program that's getting national attention. It's part of our week-long look at the war on opioids. The program's purpose, to help inmates with an opioid addiction get back on track.
And it involves medication, therapy, and a few $1 million in funding each year. Health Check 10 reporter Barbara Moore Silva takes a closer look at how this program works and why so many inmates are on board.
I grew up in group homes here in Rhode Island, and I started dabbling in drugs early in my life.
I'm 23 years old. I started dabbling with substances about 17 years old.
4 men, all incarcerated here at the Adult Correctional Institution in Rhode Island for drug-related offenses.
I ended up doing a robbery, which led me here.
All within a few months of being released.
I detoxed in a cell for 25 to 30 days. It was a tough time in my life.
That was before medication-assisted treatment, or MAT, for opioid use disorder was introduced here in 2016.
Every patient who comes through here is screened, and those who have this disease are offered this most effective treatment.
Dr. Jody Rich, the director of the Center for Prisoner Health and Human Rights at the Murrow Hospital, has been making weekly visits here for years. He's also part of Governor Gina Raimondo's Overdose Prevention Task Force, which helped convince lawmakers to fund this program to the tune of $2 million a year.
It saves lives. I mean, the bottom line is it saves lives.
But not without controversy.
In the beginning, the staff, some of the staff, myself included, had to be educated about why that's a good idea.
After all, it's trading one opioid, let's say heroin, for another, methadone or Suboxone.
The reason they work is they block you from getting high, and they keep you out of withdrawal. And those are the two main things that cause people to continue to use.
Inmates also participate in these weekly group sessions.
Once they're here and we start them on MAT, it's about a year, possibly a little longer than a year.
3 months before discharge, that therapy is started up again.
Within the first year, we saw a 60% drop in overdose deaths and people coming out, because the people with opiate addiction who are most severely, the most advanced stages of disease are the ones who end up here.
Being on the methadone every day, it's good for structure. You take a pill for depression, you take a pill to help you with your recovery and addiction. This is a big plus for the community, because having stability in here carries out there once we get released.
These men just want a fighting chance.
I don't want to be released and have nothing and then go and overdose because I have a hiccup.
They have dreams.
Just get back to work, stay clean, be in my son's life, just do the right thing for once.
And they want understanding.
I kind of hope that I could find some support in the community when I get out.
To help strengthen the current program and to close any gaps in service once they're released, a $1.5 million grant has been awarded to Brown University to support Kodak and the Rhode Island Department of Corrections. Tomorrow night at 5, we'll hit the streets to take a look at a program aimed at keeping those who qualify out of prison. With this special Health Check 10 report, I'm Barbara Moore Silva, NBC 10 News.
Every day I was up to anywhere from 30 to 40 bags a day. I call myself a recovering superstar.
Tonight, in a special Health Check 10 report, this recovery superstar sharing his story on addiction and recovery with the help of a program aimed at keeping people out of prison. We're talking about drug court. This is for those who commit nonviolent crimes and are ready to enter rehabilitation.
Health Check 10 reporter Barbara Moore Silva introduces us to a recent graduate who says it saved his life. The war on opioids, everyone's battle.
I was just totally out of control. It took complete control.
59-year-old Paul Roussel of Tiverton is talking about his drug habit. It started with cocaine. He did that for 20 years. And then 3 years ago, he gave heroin a try.
When I tried it, I liked it.
1 bag led to 2, then 3, then finally.
Every day I was up to anywhere from 30 to 40 bags a day.
Through it all, Paul continued to work as a fisherman.
I was a functioning addict.
Then on June 6, 2017, he was stopped in Newport. He had 150 bags of heroin on him, more at home. He was not only using, but selling.
I remember the police officer telling me that this may be a blessing in disguise, and I believed him.
Paul spent 3 months here at Rhode Island's Adult Correctional Institution, where he was started on methadone. And it was here that he learned about and petitioned Rhode Island's drug court.
My assignment's been in the drug court since 2012.
Assistant Attorney General Joey Lindbeck is a prosecutor in drug court.
We call ourselves the drug court team. So it's probation, it's the drug court clerk, the drug court administrator, the judge, the defense attorney, the public defender. We're all working together looking at that individual.
They all treated me like a human being, not like a number. Instead of throwing me in jail and throwing the key away, they gave me a second chance.
When I started, we had 44 participants in there, and now we're averaging around 150, 155.
I gave it my all. I really did.
He spent time in 2 Rhode Island rehab programs. He made each court date.
They do have court appearances when they start. They're shorter in time to just kind of see how they're doing, making sure they're comfortable. And as they progress in their recovery, we spread those out a bit.
Paul says he did everything he was asked, graduating from drug court early.
We give certificates to them. We each say things about our participants. You know, as one of the comments was, I've never seen a defendant hug a prosecutor before.
Paul's graduation was on August 27th, 2018. And now he's embarking on a new career as a landscaper.
I call myself a recovering superstar. Every morning I wake up, I feel like a kid again, just starting a summer vacation. I plan on living the rest of my life clean and sober and straight and happy.
Judge Alice Gibney tells us since the drug court program was expanded back in 2005, a total of 858 participants have been admitted with a 70% graduation rate, and the rearrest rates are low, just over 12% after 1 year and 13% after 3 years, showing its effectiveness. Tomorrow at 5 p.m., we take a closer look at Kristen's Law and the woman, her mom, who helped push for it. With this special Health Check 10 report, I'm Barbara Moore-Silva, NBC 10 News.
They came in and I said to them, please don't tell me my daughter's dead. And I repeated it 3 times.
Oh. A mother's pain, her daughter a statistic now. The number tells the scope of the problem. 323 overdose deaths in Rhode Island last year. Through June of this year, there were 157. Well, tonight, we're going to go beyond the statistics, meeting a woman whose daughter paid the ultimate price from a deadly dose of fentanyl. But that wasn't the end of her story.
Health Check 10 reporter Barbara Moore-Silva takes a closer look as we continue our special investigation, the war on opioids.
She mentioned that she had a hole inside of her, a hole in her soul or her heart.
Sue Kutu is talking about her daughter, Kristen.
Was how she would describe it. And when she used the drugs, she said that it filled the hole. That was the only time she felt that she was happy.
Sue says her daughter didn't even start using heroin until she was 27, but she was hooked. In 2014, after 2 years,
she finally told me one day that she had decided she was done and she was going to go to some type of rehab center.
After 30 days at the center in Texas, her insurance ran out.
I was there. I went out for the last weekend that she was there because they had a parents' weekend, and she told me straight out that she was not ready to leave. She felt that she would use if she left.
They arrived home very late Sunday night. That next afternoon,
she was going out to dinner with an old friend, and she was going to an AA meeting.
Hours later, Sue began texting and calling Kristen. Nothing.
My brother, who's a Cranston firefighter, called me and said that he had gotten a call that they had found her.
Then a knock at her door. 2 police officers on the other side.
They came in and I said to them, please don't tell me my daughter's dead. And I repeated it 3 times, please don't tell me my daughter's dead. And they said, we're sorry, ma'am.
Found in her car, a fatal overdose.
It was actually 100% fentanyl, and she died right away.
When Kristen overdosed, we had a very successful investigation with the Cranston Police Department.
Steve Neal, Aaron Andrade.
That led them to this man, Aaron Andrade. He had sold Kristen the drugs. He eventually pleaded guilty to murder. But what if he hadn't?
Kristen's case really showed something to us from a legal loophole angle.
And that's how Kristen's law came to be. It gives judges the option to send dealers to prison for life if they supply a user with an illegal drug that causes a fatal overdose.
She was my only child, and we were very close. This is what she wrote to me in a card, and it was made for me by a friend, and it's her exact handwriting.
"You are my rock, my life, my love," she wrote.
She was quite a loss to the world.
Not everyone's on board with this new law, saying it could be used to punish small-time dealers who may themselves be struggling with addiction. Tomorrow, we'll tag along with first responders who are on the front line of this epidemic. With this special Health Check 10 report, I'm Barbara Moore-Silva, NBC 10 News.
One of my cabinet members lost his son to overdose, and then 1 week later, I went to the funeral of a very good friend of mine's daughter.
This is all hands on deck.
Every day in this country, there are thousands of overdose emergency calls. On average, 115 people die every day. Those on the front lines say this is an all-out battle. This week, we're taking an in-depth look at what's being done to win the war against opioids.
And tonight, Barbara Moore-Silva takes a look at the magnitude of the crisis and why it's everybody's problem.
Coventry Fire and Rescue.
The call comes in. Possible overdose.
This is all hands on deck.
The war on opioids.
Just when we think we've figured it out, the goal line changes.
Front and center, a more recent threat, fentanyl.
These substances are made to look like they're an opioid.
So if you're getting drugs from anywhere other than a pharmacy, you might think you're taking Percocet or OxyContin, but it's actually fentanyl.
Before 2012, it was less than 5%. For 2017, it's approaching 70%.
Almost 70% of overdose deaths from fentanyl.
Almost 100 times more dangerous and deadly than heroin.
This is a packet of sugar. It's not much. It's only 1 gram. That's enough to kill 5,000 people if it was fentanyl.
500,000 people in its purest form, carfentanil.
It's not necessarily a drug addict or a junkie who's going to be overdosing. It could be a loved one who's on some opioids who just takes the wrong dosage.
One of my cabinet members lost his son to overdose, and that funeral was really hard. And then 1 week later, I went to the funeral of a very good friend of mine's daughter.
What people need to realize is that the disease of addiction affects all of us in some way or another.
Including in my family. My mom, a school teacher, died when I was 16 years old, leaving behind me, my sister, and brother. Our dad told us she died from a brain aneurysm. Years later, when we needed her death certificate for some paperwork, we actually found out she died from an accidental overdose.
Using alcohol and to excess was what got me started.
Former Rhode Island State Senator Tom Coderre had a very public fall after alcohol and drugs led to his arrest in 2003 on drug charges.
It was painful for me and for my family, but I got to the other side of it.
He is celebrating 14 years of recovery and is now Governor Gina Raimondo's senior advisor in the crusade against the opioid overdose epidemic.
I decided I needed someone who was like a full-time point person thinking about this all day long.
There are 3 barriers that prevent people from sustaining their recovery for the long term. One is housing, the other is education, and the third is jobs.
So it's boots on the ground from those on the streets trying to reach people in the throes of homelessness and addiction to what's going on behind bars.
Anyone who is being discharged from the Department of Corrections gets to sign up for what we call a safe ride, so that they, as they're being discharged, they have their medication-assisted treatment, they have their naloxone, and they also have a ride, to a safe place.
This is an all-out assault, education, treatment, and antidote.
Naloxone has saved a lot of lives.
And the numbers bear that out. In 2016, there were 336 overdose deaths in Rhode Island. That number dropped by about 100 in 2017. Health officials believe widespread use of naloxone by first responders is a big reason why. All this week, we'll be examining what's being done throughout southern New England to help reverse the opioid overdose epidemic. We hope what you'll learn is that we all have a role to play. Tomorrow, we take you on a response call with local first responders. With this special report, I'm Barbara Moore Silva, NBC 10 News.
It's not necessarily a drug addict or a junkie who's going to be overdosing.
We go in and help the patient as fast as we can, deconning them and getting them off to the hospital while keeping everybody safe.
Emergency first responders across the nation called to hundreds of overdoses each day. But as they fight to help patients, there's a new danger that's emerging. We're taking an in-depth look this week at what's being done to fight the national opioid crisis.
And tonight we talk to local first responders fighting the battle on the front lines. NBC 10's Barbara Moore Silva reports.
Coventry Fire and Rescue.
From the initial call,
we're in before responding for a possible overdose.
First responders are on their way within minutes, armed with the overdose antidote, naloxone.
We're working together to kind of protect not only our officers, but understanding more how to protect the people in the community.
This is not an actual overdose call. It's a drill demonstrating what happens when the call comes into first responders in Coventry.
With the opioid epidemic in Rhode Island, we started training probably last year on how to administer Narcan.
But it's getting more tricky to answer these calls.
Our officers are coming into contact, first-hand contact with it.
It is fentanyl, which is about 100 times more dangerous than heroin. All it takes is a whiff.
On a car stop, one of our officers was conducting an investigation. The wind picked up and kicked up some white powdery substance. At the time, we didn't know what it was.
A short time later.
And started to exhibit signs of an overdose. His fingers were numb. He started to feel dizzy. His speech was slightly slurred. Supervisor administered the Narcan. He was transported to the hospital.
Where after the Narcan wore off, he began to overdose again.
This stuff will last about 45 minutes, whereas opiates in your system could last up to 3 hours.
That officer survived, but others across the country have not. And that's why Coventry is implementing a fentanyl-specific response protocol. There are 3 levels. Level 1 is minimal risk. Level 2.
If we see a white powder, we tactically retreat. We get into an encapsulated suit. We go in and help the patient as fast as we can, deconning them and getting them off to the hospital while keeping everybody safe.
Level 3 is if multiple victims are down. Equally important is arming the community with knowledge that this can happen to anyone.
It's not necessarily a drug addict or a junkie who's going to be overdosing. It could be a loved one who's on some opioids who just takes the wrong dosage.
It's important to know the symptoms of overdose.
Blue lips, labored breathing, sometimes not breathing at all.
And arming yourself. Naloxone readily available to anyone at your local pharmacy. No prescription necessary. Those in the trenches will tell you that homelessness and opioid use disorder often go hand in hand. Tomorrow, we'll take a look at one group that's out there most days trying to make a difference. With this special report, I'm Barbara Moore Silva, NBC 10 News.
And you often see just snapshots of folks when they're at their worst and when they're struggling and they're feeling their worst. So having some direct education around it is something that was lacking in my training.
In the war on opioids, homelessness and addiction, they often go hand in hand. And the fight to overcome both of those complicated issues can be daunting. Tonight, we continue our in-depth look at what's being done to win that war.
And Emily, we are learning firsthand what their strategy is. NBC 10's Barbara Moore Silva takes us to the streets with a local group.
Being out in the street really gives you the opportunity to see and be a small part of people's lived experience.
It is cold, below freezing, in an area of Providence many won't venture out into at night.
I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it.
Here along Broad Street in this upper South Providence neighborhood, the stories are real.
I'm homeless and you're robbing me.
Megan Smith is an outreach program manager at the House of Hope, whose mission it is to prevent and end homelessness.
We certainly do have folks that we see time and time again.
Many who live on the streets in nooks and crannies are not only homeless, but addicted to drugs.
Do they contribute to each other? Absolutely. Folks who are experiencing homelessness have to find lots of ways to cope.
It is on these streets where Megan and her team work to make a difference.
Each of these pins represents a person that we've contacted, and we write down who contacted them and a little bit about what we spoke about.
Perfect. They actively search areas where folks might be taking solace. Aside from distributing necessities like warm socks, they hand out clean needles and the overdose antidote, naloxone.
I'm a big believer that the wider the distribution, the better.
So when they find a kit in an area known to be used as shelter, it gives them hope.
I heard a great quote actually on the news this morning that from a first responder, and she said that every time I give someone Narcan, that's another chance for them to get into recovery. So anyone who says that, Narcan is an enabling tool or anything like that hasn't been out here.
Is there a time frame where you think?
Dr. Craig Kaufman, a psychiatrist, is part of this outreach effort.
As a physician, you're going to see homeless people, and you often see just snapshots of folks when they're at their worst and when they're struggling and they're feeling their worst. So having some direct education around it is something that was lacking in my training.
I was homeless at the age of 16.
Part of this boots on the ground movement, Samantha Hill, who was not only homeless but addicted.
Cocaine, crack cocaine, we call it, and also heroin. So I want to get back to the community, help them, let them know that there is options out there, that there is ways of changing.
Part of that process, verifying someone really is homeless, which is often required to be eligible for housing.
Building that documentation that just because I'm not in a shelter doesn't mean I'm not homeless. I think the biggest function we serve out here is supportive listening and bearing witness to people's lived experience. Really just taking the time to listen to people and then learning from there how we can best support them.
House of Hope, one example of what's being done in our communities to reach, teach, and help people turn their lives around. Tomorrow we take you to 2 communities where first responders are making a difference. With this special report, I'm Barbara Moore Silva, NBC 10 News.